This is the preface to Dandelion Roots Run Deep, written by Merrill Clark and Merrill Clark. I wrote the preface. I am Mary. I always knew, but I didn't know that I knew. This is December 2021. My mother is my only child. Without realizing it, I arranged my life so that I could be available for her when she needed me in her later years. After living out west for most of my adult life, I was drawn back to Michigan because of her. Oh, I had a few other reasons to be here, medical issues, housing. But the reason I'm here now in Michigan, in this old farmhouse, writing this, is because of her. As I write this, my mother is still alive, but Alzheimer's stole her ability to write around the year 2010. It is now 2021, and she's in the nursing home, but has little conception of where she is in time or space. She has no notion of her own identity nor anyone else's. She floats through her very basic days in a haze. It's clear she knew she would outlive her memory. So she kept her memories alive as long as she could by writing them down over and over and reading her writing over and over. Her only wish was to remember. It is now my job to edit her work to some extent and bring it out into the light of day. Some of it is based on her mother's writing, which is rendered here as if my mother was an omniscient viewer of events. She had some of her mother's writing from which she drew, but the originals from the 1940s are long gone. My father's voice is here too, although this story is told from a female perspective. You, as my dear reader, will want to pay special attention to who is speaking in each section, and I have attempted to make those shifts as clear as possible in a story that covers multiple generations, multiple voices, and multiple perspectives. There are more perspectives than voices as I expand on all the issues here and then connect them to current issues in the larger culture, which are intertwined, embedded, and entangled in the experiences of all three women. This expansion is how the roots run deep in more ways than one in this book. Tenacity is the bedrock of the organic movement, which grew out of the Back to the Land movement. My parents did not start the fire of organic farming that began eons ago. They just refused to let the fire go out. And now here I am, documenting that indelible through line between them and telling my own story of what it was like growing up with parents who wouldn't back down. All her labor was born of love, as this book is too. She loved her mother, who died in 1987. She loved her husband, who died in 2006. And she loved her children, all of whom are still alive. But above all, she loved Mother Earth. Not a day went by that she did not watch carefully. She would count the leaves as they fell in the fall and note the order of first blooms in the spring. Some might say she was a privileged lady to be able to pay attention to these small glories. She turned the privilege into responsibility. Some might call this Midwestern values, but at this point, that phrase has political connotations and means something different to everyone. I like to think it's just living as if tomorrow matters. Tomorrow's life matters. And when I say life, I don't mean only human life. When I was young, of course, I hated the Midwest and I longed for California. But there is something much more rooted and grounded about the Midwest. All of California is made up of transplants, after all. I was lucky to have my roots in Michigan and the wings of youthful ambition to get to California, both of which I owe to my parents, since by their example, I chose lofty goals. The next generation is coming into the ranks of organic agriculture and environmentalism, and from this book they can learn about the difficulties of starting out in organic and some of the history of the green movement. Older generations can relate to the agrarian history of the 1940s, as my mother wrote about growing up on a 24-acre farm in Illinois. Many women will relate to the marriage issues and family conflict that can arise in a small family business. Those resisting the anti-women and anti-democratic forces that have been afoot in this country in recent years can relate to her grit and persistence. Those who are or will be caring for a parent with Alzheimer's can certainly relate to my experience trying to care for my mother. There are 5 parts to this book. Parts 1 and 2 are all her voice. Parts 3 and 4 are Mom, Dad, and me. The last part is my expansion on all of this. Dandelion Roots Run Deep. Find it everywhere books are sold.